in honor of former Cleveland Browns cornerback MJ Stewart. Welcome into the 36th episode of Cleveland Sports Realm. I am Kevin, joined alongside Jerome as always. Producer Eric's behind the camera. We can see him, you can't. Jerome, how are we doing this Wednesday evening as we record?
We're doing okay. Hanging in there, Hump day.
Yeah, it is. It is hump day, and I actually want to give a quick shout-out to producer Eric anyway. He was kind enough to – I stopped over a little bit early before the recording. I've never been a handyman, so the guy helped me, change my oil in my car, saved me about $50-$60. The man of many talents, producer Eric. We appreciate you behind the camera. We appreciate you under the vehicle as well.
Yeah, the guy jumped from right underneath the vehicle under his ramps to right up here in the producer
So right
seat.
Behind the camera. It's unbelievable what he does.
Oh, my. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Doesn't get better than old Derek.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. So I was thinking, Jerome, to start out this episode, probably talk some Guardians. It's kind of been the game of streaks now for them. They're coming off that 10-game losing streak. They're now on a 2-game winning streak against the Houston Astros. And obviously they're going to be playing in about the next half hour or so we won't have the third game of the series to really talk about. But it was nice to see them get these last couple wins.
They desperately needed it.
Needed it bad.
There's no other way to say, listen, this thing is already fallen off the wagon. It's been long gone. It's probably been over since early June, mid-June. I'll say mid-June. I'll be optimistic, I guess. But, yeah, at this point, it's good. They're playing for pride, so good for them. They got a couple wins. Yeah, can they still climb back in? Are they only 4 out of the AL wild card? Yeah, they are, but I look at the lineups that they put out there versus the lineups that all the other teams in the hodgepodge of the American League put out there. And our lineup ain't even close. It's not really competitive. So, and we went over that extensively with our guests last week. But the one thing I'll say that maybe was a good sign, if I had to find one, and it's real hard to find right now, Nolan Jones had a couple hits last night. We've dogged him really hard.
Yep.
And rightly so. Drug him through the mud. He had a couple hits last night. And the one thing, I guess now it's the second thing, so I guess I am finding multiple positives, which is really hard to do with this team. I really had to look long and hard.
Yeah.
But Hunter Brown is an absolute ace, man, and they put 6 runs up on him last night, and that's pretty impressive because that guy don't give up runs to anybody. He's super good, American League All-Star. I mean, so to do that was kind of impressive.
Yeah.
Considering their lineup.
Yeah, I would say so as well, and it just goes back, and we've talked about this a few times before. I love when they do that, and I also hate when they do that because it just comes in spurts with this team, right? Like they'll drop the 6 to 7 runs in a game, and you're like, okay, this offense is getting going, and then you get the 2-1 losses, the 3-2 losses where when you leave 9 runners on base.
They've had way too many of them.
Yeah, and those typically follow suit right after. So obviously great to see, and it was very nice to see Nolan get into it. Obviously that was my pick for the breakout player of the year for the Guardians, and obviously hasn't been that way. But it was very nice to see him get it going. And somebody else we talked about is kind of the X factor of this team preseason, Bo Naylor. He's been a guy that we really wanted to see come into his own, former first-round pick, obviously brother of Josh, so very high expectations coming into the season. And honestly, just coming into that draft pick alone, especially after we acquired Josh back in 2020, still sub the Mendoza line, still not – he hasn't been – we talked about the improved defense, but, I was at the game on Sunday against Tarek Skubal, and, it seemed we were one strike away from finishing that ball game. Class A throws one in the dirt, but also very, very manageable in order to get in front of that and shouldn't have never got between his legs. Obviously, runner scores from third. They tie the game. Obviously, next batter gets out, and then, I think the game finished like 7-1, and it was 1-0 or 1-0 at that point.
And
so
I don't want to be too hard on the guy, but if it's not for Bo Naylor blocks that, which I know it's hard, but you're a major league catcher. You've been for 3 years now.
Your first-round pick.
Yeah, block that ball, and this team might actually have a 3-game winning streak. And
as we record Wednesday.
Right. Of course, good housekeeping there. No.
Thanks.
They might have a 3-game winning streak against what I would say 2 out of the 3 of those being against aces because Hunter Brown and then Tarek Skubal.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not the case that we have here. Now, did Bo Naylor, we talked about it last week with our guest, Phil Yan, who was here. Bo Naylor is probably playing for his Guardians' life because with Cooper Angle smashing the hell out of the ball in the minors. And then, of course, David Fry probably to be able to catch next year. And I think they like David Fry a lot, even though he's only hitting 150 right now and his DH only against lefty roll or whatever. I think that Bo Naylor is playing for his guardian life. And we talked about it last week. All three of us agreed at this current juncture, as it stands here today, he's probably getting non-tenured at the end of the year, not tendered.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I don't really understand why they would keep him around at this point. And it kind of goes back to the point of how we talked about the Gabriel Ariases and the Brian Rocchios of, you keep these guys in the system so long and they never develop, and now you've completely lost value of them. Like, there's going to be no market for Bo Naylor after this year.
No,
None.
What would probably happen if I had to put my hypothetical lens on it here and throw it on, I think what would happen would be that Bo would get non-tendered by the Guardians, and he probably would sign a major league deal with an invite to spring, or a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. What would probably happen. Now, look, there's still half a year less than half a year now. We are approaching the All-Star break after this weekend, Kevin. And I do want a name you mentioned, Brian Rocchio. This is more of a stat of how just awful he was before he went to Columbus and then come back now. Brian Rocchio has more extra base hits in this series. And that's only 2 games as we record this. He has more extra base hits in this series than he did the entire time he was up here the first time.
How many games did he play the first time? Like 30?
No, it was longer than that.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, wow.
But still, either way you slice it, that's not like, oh, wow, Brian Rocchio's hot. That's more, Brian Rocchio was horrible before he went down. Horrible. So maybe he figured it out. I don't know. They brought Big Christmas back last night, and thoughts and prayers with Kyle Manzardo's mom. I saw on Twitter today that Daniel Schneeman's dad, Patrick Schneeman, who's very active on Twitter, said that the heart transplant was successful. So that's great news. So, Kyle Manzardo's mom, like we said, our thoughts and prayers are with her because heart transplants are risky business. That's a tough, major operation.
Absolutely. I couldn't imagine what the family was going through in that time. So obviously, very happy that everything worked out for him.
So he went down, or he went on the family medical emergency. Big Christmas came back up. Boy, it was more of the same. I mean, just whiff. He's providing as much free air conditioning as Austin Hedges now. And, I'm trying to maybe be a little bit excited, but then it's like, I just have this bad feeling. And the only thing I can go off is what they've shown me recently. I have this bad feeling, Kevin, they're just going to go get their asses kicked in Chicago this weekend. That's a big deal for the White Sox. They're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 2005 championship team. And
we've seen Cleveland teams play spoiler on those occasions though before.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain after the whole Boston Marathon thing, the Tribe were playing in Boston at the time and just went in and beat them the next day. They've played spoiler before. I'm not too concerned with it, to be honest.
Well, yeah, but I just see how they've played offense the last month, and they did have and let's zero in on last night's game because Angel Martinez, Stephen Vogt should have given him the game ball because he saved Stephen Vogt's ass last night. Stephen Vogt made boneheaded pinch hitting decision after boneheaded pinch hitting decision.
Which is that not the tale of the entire season?
And it is. And I also think it's like on Vogt a little bit, but it's also on the front office. And we went super into that. If you want to go back to last week's episode 35, we went super into this front office just really screwing the pooch on the off season. And, so I don't want to get too much into that tonight and too much. We went real deep into the weeds on that last go around. But again, part of this is on the front office because Vogt's trying to grasp at straws and none of these guys are any good, quite honestly. But at the same time, how are they going to get any good if you never let them face, swing at the bat against somebody who's throwing the ball from the same side, arm side as them? And that's my issue, right? Like, look, I know that Daniel Schneeman, supposedly according to them, we don't know because he never gets a chance to, can't hit lefties. I also know that Josh Hader's one of the most dominant lefties around. And I think under any circumstance, I get it. You're only right-handed bat at that point was Jonathan Rodriguez, and you wanted to have a chance with the righty against the lefty, I don't care who it is. I never, ever, ever want to see Jonathan Rodriguez with all four of my eyes pinch hit ever again. The guy stinks. He's a bum. DFA him today.
Well, I wouldn't even just say about like the pinch hitting. I would also say like how he's so obsessed with the matchups when it comes to pitching too. I mean, even the game on Sunday, Hunter Gaddis was mowing him down through an inning and 2/3, and they get to the top of the order. Colt Keith steps into the dish for the Tigers, and it's we're gonna go to Sobrowski, the lefty. Okay, Colt Keith, second baseman, and they decided to give Gleyber Torres, their all-star second baseman, the day off. And why would they not pinch hit him? Which they did.
Right.
He gets on base. Sobrowski walks the next two or gave up a hit and a walk or whatever it was, loads the bases, and then we got to go to the pen again. Like, let's use some common – not everything's a matchup game. I feel like he forgets that the other manager can also play the matchup game, and you got to start playing chess and not checkers. Like, think about the next step that would happen after you make that move and what those consequences could be, because that almost blew the game on Sunday. I mean, they ended up blowing it anyway, but that decision itself almost blew the game.
Right, 100%. And then we talked about it a little bit last week, but the obsession with Matt Festa is truly
It's disgusting.
mind-boggling. This is a guy who's been a quad A bullpen pitcher his whole career, up, down, up, down, up, down, and suddenly you trade for him and you just decide that he's going to be one of your high leverage guys. And by the way, every time that he comes into a low leverage situation, he magically has the wand to make it a high leverage situation. He stinks. Enough of Matt Festa. I've had enough of that. And I got to tell you, Kevin, you bring up a good point. Look, the pinch hitting decisions stink, but the bullpen management's almost been worse. Stephen Vogt has not had a great year, honestly.
No, and actually,
and I don't. And again, I am going to say some of it is roster-based. Like, this roster sucks. We went into it last week. It sucks. It's a crappy roster. It's garbage. But guess what? You still have to make lemons with lemonade, and you have to make chicken salad with chicken you-know-what. And the bottom line is Stephen Vogt's making it worse. He's making a bad roster worse because he's not putting guys in situations to succeed. Again, the Jonathan Rodriguez pinch hit last night was just... It can make you throw up. It was so disgusting.
Yeah, and I don't want to sit here and glaze myself as you typically would say, but I feel like I've been on this vote thing for the last month and a half to 2 months. But I mean, I think it's time that the fan base really does sit down. I think it's time that the Guardians organization sits down and really thinks about what they're doing here. I mean, because we saw it in the playoffs the past postseason, the mismanagement with the bullpen, the panic situations in the second inning of an ALCS or ALDS game, like those decisions, and that he's almost carried it over what seems like into this first half, a little bit over now, this first half of the regular season, where he's panicking in certain situations instead of just letting the game play out. Like, if something's working, then something's working, and stick with it. I mean, I'll say this too, even to the Tigers' standpoint, when I was at the game on Sunday, they pulled Skubal. Skubal was mowing him down. I think he was in the early 80s in pitches. I forget what his exact pitch count was through 7. But they end up pulling him out, and then the Guardians get a run out of it. Like, what are you doing if you're the Tigers? You've got the best pitcher in baseball, one of the most dominant pitchers I've ever seen, the most recent dominant pitcher that I can remember, truthfully.
Right.
And we're pulling him in the early 80s after 7 innings because why? I mean, it's not like we could touch Skubal the entire game.
No, we can't touch people's fifth starters who have 6 ERAs.
Exactly. So, like, what are these managers? They're like, it's so analytical. And I know I don't want to bring this to Browns talk because there's really nothing to talk about with the Browns, but we talk about them and the analytics in certain situations. They run these formations and these plays because the analytics dictates that. I feel like the MLB's been more analytical than the NFL lately. Like, these managers are obsessed with these matchups, and it's like, just play the game of baseball. Put your best players out there. Stephen Vogt said it, about a month ago. I believe that if you can hit the baseball, you can hit the baseball. It's not necessarily all about matchups. Yes, it is, Stephen. We've been watching you for the last year and a half. It's always been about the matchups with you. Put the best players out there. I mean, at this point, what do you have to lose?
I mean, you're 100% right.
I'm sorry for that little rant there, but it's frustrating.
I enjoyed it. But
Thank you.
The bottom line is, and that's in all sports now. It's too much of guys who went to Ivy League schools who should be working on Wall Street or making decisions in sports now. And
they just look at numbers and dictate everything off of numbers instead of this guy can play the sport.
The Browns' entire franchise, and I'm going to touch on him too, has been dictated by a geek named Paul DePodesta for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I was about to say over a decade, I think now.
So, the Guardians, they probably look at analytics a lot too, and that's where I wonder, how much of this is Stephen Vogt and how much is this is him being told what to do. We'll never know, ever.
I feel like a lot of this and the only reason I say this is because I think the management, it's the same management that we had when Tito was in place, and Tito was not doing this. So I'm going to say that it's a Vogt decision.
Yeah, but here's something I'm going to throw back at you.
Okay.
Tito probably had the privilege to decide who was cleaning the toilets in Section 564. He probably got to decide everything in that organization. I don't think Stephen Vogt has that same sort of power.
I mean, he shouldn't.
And I don't think he does. So, our guest last week, Philly Anna, brought something up to me yesterday that's interesting. Vogt was given a 3-year contract.
Yeah.
So, typically, you don't let a manager go into a lame duck year. So, after this year, they probably would have to decide whether they want to extend Vogt or let him go into his walk year, which would be – that's something interesting we could talk about in the offseason in December and whatnot, November. But probably actually October because I don't know if they're making it.
I mean, looking at it now – like if you were to make the decision now, obviously they get the luxury of being able to wait the next 3 months or so. If you were management right now, what would your decision be? Would you let him go that 3rd year, or would you extend him?
I would probably extend him, but it wouldn't be a big one. I'd probably give him so that would be 2020. I'd probably sign him a 1-year extension through 2027.
See, I think If you've been a loyal listener to this, you kind of know my stance on Stephen Vogt, and I'm not a huge fan of the decisions he makes. I think he's been bailed out a lot sometimes, specifically last year from some of the decisions that he made.
Last night, really, even.
Yeah, last night too. I would just let him go into the year. I'm not in a position, in my opinion, to make a decision on whether we're going to extend him, and I also don't want to fire him at the same time after this year.
Right.
I would just let him go into that year and see how that year plays out.
Because also you don't want to look like fools fired him, because this is a guy who
he just won Manager of the Year.
Right. Last year, who had, not a great roster either last year and got him close to the World Series.
Yeah, that's typically we see that stuff happen in the NBA. They win the Coach of the Year, and then the next year they're fired. Like we typically don't see that in the MLB or the NFL. So it would shock me if they fired him. I think it would also surprise me if they extended him.
This is an organization who doesn't fire anybody. Like, I mean, look at their history. I mean, it's been the same front office since practically we've been alive. Minus the couple guys like Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro, who took off for Toronto. But like everybody, like Chernoff's been around there forever. Antonetti's been around forever. They don't fire people, and that probably goes back to ownership, how cheap they are. They're not paying people not to work. Like Jimmy.
I was about to say.
Jimmy will pay anybody not to work. He pays more people not to work than people who do
He might still be paying Hugh.
Yeah, who knows?
He's probably paying. He probably just actually got done paying Freddie Kitchens.
Probably.
So I think that was a 4-year deal.
Probably, roughly. But the Dolans, I mean, they're sitting there rubbing two dimes together, hoping to generate 25 cents. I mean, they're not fired. They're not paying people not to work. Like if Stephen Vogt got fired or relieved of his duties, as they like to call it now, that nobody gets fired anymore. Everybody gets relieved or mutually parts ways.
Yeah, they mutually part ways.
If Stephen Vogt does one of those two things, I would be absolutely flabbergasted, fall out of my chair in the studio if we had to sit here and talk about Stephen Vogt getting fired. I don't see it happening under any circumstance.
Yeah, I don't see it happening either. Now, what do you think's going to happen with the front office? You think?
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing either.
Absolutely nothing. Those guys, that's part of why I think that they've become a little passive, is because in sports, typically, you make a bad move, you're looking, I mean, that's your job. Not here, because, again, they're not paying people not to work. They're just not going to do that. Now, what would be interesting is when David Blitzer comes in, does he want his own people in there, his own establishment of own front office and all that? Or since he's a minority owner right now, is he already, we don't know. That's the thing. Is he already sitting in on player personnel decisions with Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff and Stephen Vogt? Nobody knows, but my guess would be...
I would say probably sometimes.
Not often because he's a
Yeah.
minority owner. My guess would be that Blitzer would probably keep those guys around too because that's just the way they've always done it. But, hey, you never know. I mean, it's been a quarter century of doing the things the same way because the Dolans have owned it for a quarter century. But you saw when Jimmy took over for Randy Lerner, you went from a guy who didn't even go to a game in 8 years to a guy who comes to every game and literally
We'll spend as much money as possible in order to try to make it
possible, but also fire people left, right, and center constantly.
Well, and that's the one thing that we've talked about the last few days. I forget who it was. I believe the guy was from Barstool that had brought it up, but basically said, this Guardians team, they're very, this was very lethargic before, they beat the Astros a couple times. Tough to watch. And it's not even like they're trying. They're not going out to spend money. They're not going out and making a big trade or a big splash, whatever it might be. He said, you can, look at the Browns and make fun of the Browns all you want. At least they try to get there, though. They spend the most money in the NFL. They make the big trades every few years to try to put themselves over the top. It has never worked, but at least they try to do something.
Right, and you could make the same argument for Dan down there at one center court.
Yeah. He's the best owner out of the three.
You may not like what Dan always decides to do, and sometimes, and obviously since his own health issues, he's become a little more passive naturally because his health comes first, and rightly so. But before Dan had his stroke, man, sometimes he would fire people and you're like, what? That doesn't make sense. Or like the weird decision to bring back Mike Brown after you fired him and then fire him again.
Yeah.
You may not always like what Dan does, but Dan tries.
Yeah.
They don't try over there at the quarter of Carnegie in Ontario. Their whole philosophy, in my opinion, and a lot of people who cover them say this, their philosophy every year is, well, first and foremost, payroll's got to be at this number. And that's the most important thing over there. Bar everything else, payroll has to be at this number. That's the most important thing. Second thing, well, usually with that, then you're restrained. So then our front office looks at it, and it's like every year since 2017 was the last year we could say they really went for it. Kevin, that was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe 2018. And we talked about that last week. Then it's been pretty consistently shedding since then, minus like the little splash year of Zunino and Bell.
Progressively, yeah.
Which when they did spend money, it didn't work out. But over there, their whole philosophy is, well, we'll try to mash some veterans with some young kids, and let's just get in there and see what happens. There's never a mantra of, boy, we haven't won a World Series in 77 years. Let's really try to win one. No. Never. It's let's get in there and then let's roll the dice at the craps table and see what the hell happens. And that gets really old as a fan. And I get it. It's not going to change under the Dolans, and that's why you hope it does under Blitzer. But that 1 year of our lives that they really tried, it was really cool to see that.
Well, it was a magical year. I know it ended in heartbreak, in the ALDS, but it was an absolutely magical year. And you looked at that. That was the first time, because we've heard about the lineups that, I'm sure your dad's brought up, my brother's brought up to me, of those 95 to 97 teams, of just how amazingly stacked those teams were. At one point, I think they had it was at least 5 to 6 All-Stars starters in the All-Star game.
Like Manny Ramirez, who if it wasn't for steroids would be a Hall of Famer.
He batted like 7th.
Batted 7th.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So, looking at that 2017 team, the Lindor, Kipnis, Ramirez, Encarnacion, Bruce, Santana, Brantley, Gomes, and then they rounded it off with Gio Urshela at third base in the playoffs. And obviously that was before he was like Gio Urshela the next following few years, but still an absolutely stacked lineup that you rolled into that year. And then we had the pitching as well. And it just sucks less than a decade later. They're bottom 5 in payroll, probably bottom 5 in talent in the MLB, I would say almost easily. You could probably consider them bottom 5 in talent. It's probably bottom 2 if you remove Jose Ramirez and Steven Kwan, maybe even the worst.
Yeah.
So it is frustrating to see how far they've come in the wrong direction in less than 10 years.
Well, absolutely. And like you just made a valid point. And this is something that's really interesting, that it's a total hypothetical, but it's something I think that is worth bringing up. If Jose didn't decide to say, piss $100 million or $150 million down the drain, whatever it was, and decide to basically lock Paul Dolan in the office and say, I ain't going anywhere, so figure it out. I'll sign for whatever, but it's got to be semi-reasonable, and it still really wasn't for his talent level. If he decided not to do that, where would they be as a franchise? You think about that was signed before 2022. I'm thinking they would probably be going on their 4th straight garbage losing season.
Yeah, I'm actually going to come in here, I think, with a little bit of a hot take. And I'm going to look at this from a business standpoint, almost like how I looked at the Browns and the Myles Garrett scenario. And as much as I want Jose Ramirez to retire a Cleveland Guardian, I think the best decision, because this team has absolutely no trajectory and no vision for the future, I think their best decision might have been to trade him and just try to get whatever haul you could have. Because we're wasting, honestly, like, the Guardians are wasting their own time, and they're wasting Jose Ramirez's time. I get that Jose wants to be here, and I absolutely love that. He's going to go down as my favorite Indian of all time. And I'm coming out and saying this. I think the best thing for both parties was to part ways, just how I think the best thing for both parties when it came to Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns was to part ways. Because this team right now has no trajectory. You get a haul of young prospects. Granted, probably half of them aren't going to work out. That's the prospect game that you play, though. So, but maybe you do get a few studs in there. But I don't understand what they're doing anymore.
No. Well, and you also think about it, like 2022 came out of nowhere. And then 2023, They weren't very good. They were 10 games under 500. Then 2024, that run came out of nowhere. So instead of building on it, they subtracted. We went over that all last week. But, it's sad to say, but you might be right if that's where they wanted to do. But the problem is that's not the way it should have been.
I agree. Listen, I agree with you. But I'm saying that with the circumstances that we have right now as an organization, I think that might have been the best decision for them and Jose. And like I said, I want him to be a career Guardian. I want him to finish his career. I'm just looking at this from a pure business standpoint on both party sides.
Right.
It probably did not make any sense for him to take the discount that he did if he wanted to actually compete and win a World Series at some point in his career. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from that. I've never looked at it like that, but you're 100% right. That's a very interesting take, but it's also one that probably has some validity because they've hardly, all the money he saved them, they've hardly reinvested any of it. I mean, what have they done? Josh Bell, Mike Zunino, and those didn't work out. Jacob Junis and Paul Sewald, those didn't work out.
Dude, and to think that we were going to be one of those teams in the offseason that was going to make a Bo Bichette trade. I mean, we were out of our damn mind thinking that was going to happen this past offseason.
Yeah, and that's the only thing you could hope for is the blitzer comes in here and is willing to open the wallet, because Paul Dolan's wallet, it's buried so far deep, nobody knows where the thing is. It's like the eighth wonder of the world. I mean, that thing's so hidden and locked tight.
Yeah.
I mean, and the few times that they do come out and that pull a few pennies out of it, they instantly try to get off of that money. So we'll see. One last thing about the Guardians, Kevin. Luis Ortiz, I don't even know if you want to call it a scandal yet, I guess, because it's so like bizarre.
Maybe call it a controversy.
Yes, that's a more appropriate word for it. Luis Ortiz obviously is on administrative paid leave right now, which Paul Dolan hates, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
He's furious that it's not unpaid leave. But Luis Ortiz is on administrative paid leave because 2 of his pitches, one against Seattle, I believe, and I can't remember who the other one was against, had an unusually high amount of bets that hit, and both pitches were way outside the strike zone.
Yeah, the bets were first pitch of that inning to be a ball.
Right, and they were so far not even close to the strike zone. They were in a different stratosphere. This kind of sucks because Luis Ortiz showed a lot of promise, and if this comes back, that he may not be allowed to, participate.
Play ever again.
Yeah. You hope that maybe it's just like a 1 year suspension, 1 year ban, because showed a lot of promise. It's unfortunate. as much as we've just dogged them the last 2 weeks, it was a move I liked by the front office.
I understood it in the moment.
And it's really rough because he did show a lot of promise, and now might have thrown that away. And this is not something that baseball takes lightly, I should say. You saw Tupa Mercado get banned for life. Pat Hoiberg, the umpire, was banned for a couple of years, I believe. He's allowed to apply for reinstatement, which he probably won't get. Pete Rose didn't go into the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose wasn't allowed back in baseball until after he passed away.
Yeah, which is just ridiculous.
So this is something that baseball takes very seriously. You hope that the investigation turns out positive for the Guardians, but these things never seem to go the way for the team and the player. Usually baseball wins these kind of things.
Yeah, they typically do. And I think the most frustrating thing, for us as Tribe fans is, looking at this specific, obviously Luis Ortiz, just looking at this specific scenario, and this is going to be, like I said, the selfish side of this, just looking inward, I should say. If he ends up being suspended or, basically expelled from the league, we got nothing for Francisco Lindor.
No.
Ahmed Rosario gone. Andres Jimenez gone. Luis Ortiz for Andres Jimenez gone. There's still, I think that Josh Wolf kid might still be in the pipeline. Don't know about him. That's been like 4 years.
I
feel like
Isaiah Green's still at single A.
Yeah, and then there was another prospect or two we got in that Jimenez, or I guess it would have been Horowitz that we flipped for him. I think there was another prospect or two, but no active players in the MLB roster for Francisco Lindor. I think that's the most frustrating part of this, at least for me. It's not like it was Gavin Williams. We didn't give up anything for Gavin Williams.
We drafted him.
So I just think that's the most frustrating part of this is that this was basically the last piece of this Francisco Lindor deal. And if he ends up being kicked out of the league essentially permanently, that Francisco Lindor deal that I was such a fan of at the time, I really was, came back and it's completely bitten us in the ass.
Yeah, I was pissed the day of the trade. And, it'd be nice to still have him here, Lindor, obviously, but that was never going to happen. We knew that when the owner literally said, enjoy him.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's frustrating for sure, and that's a good angle to look at it. You come up with a couple good angles tonight from things regarding the Guardians. One last thing I wanted to touch on. Chase DeLauder still killing it. Chase DeLauder still killing it for the Columbus Clippers. If the only thing that could be bad about this, if they've hit the ball really well. They've scored 17 runs the last 2 nights, right?
Yeah.
That's probably more than they scored the whole month of June. No, seriously, it might be close though. But they scored 17 runs the last 2 nights. If this now makes the front office think that they don't need to bring them up, I am going to be pissed beyond belief.
I just don't understand this
Do not think because a bunch of crappy-ass hitters like Bo Naylor and Brian Rocchio started stroking the ball well in Houston, they're going to be good all of a sudden. No. Chase DeLauder still needs to be here. I don't care what they say. I'm thinking now at this point, maybe after the All-Star break, that's my next hoping point.
Yeah, you can hope because we were talking about this the other night. The service time thing isn't even a thing anymore.
No,
right?
He's past the Super 2 deadline.
Yeah, so what in the hell are you waiting for?
Nobody knows.
We need a corner outfielder. We need a bat. And we have a corner outfielder raking in Columbus right now.
And here's the thing. Even if Chase DeLauder comes up and he doesn't light the world on fire, which is most likely going to happen.
He's going to bat between 220 to 230 probably.
And even if Chase DeLauder doesn't light the world on fire, by the way, he's still better than about 4 or 5 of the guys you're running out there on a nightly basis. Because let's go through it tonight. You're 6, 7, and 8 literally can make you vomit all over the studio. Jonathan Rodriguez, Will Wilson, and Austin Hedges. If any of those guys, between the 3 of them, get 1 hit, it's a win for the team. Yeah. That's a 6, 7, 8 that's just not going to do anything. So we'll see what happens tonight if they can actually get a sweep for the first time in forever.
Tribe up 2-0, top of the first.
Wow. Did Jose hit another home run? By the way, why is Houston pitching to him? I know that's like a random live on-air thought.
Jose Ramirez, too. Or, no, back-to-back home runs from Angel Martinez and Jose Ramirez.
Wow. Angel's getting hot in Houston.
He reminds me a lot of Ahmed Rosario.
He's very streaky.
In the sense of he's either the hottest hitter in baseball or the coldest.
Yeah. Well, and in Houston, Joe Espada, I think that's their manager, Joe Estrada, whatever. No, it is Joe Espada. He should be like questioned and grilled by the Houston media for pitching to Jose Ramirez all series. Like, especially in the lineup he sits in right now. If I was any manager and there wasn't 2 outs with nobody on, I'm walking him every single time. And I get why they don't want to, because he's a pain in the ass on the base paths and he has like 24 stolen bases this year. But who cares if he steals second and third? In this lineup, he still ain't going to take home.
Yeah, because, I mean, after him, probably our best shot. I mean, if there are 2 outs, he's not getting home.
No.
He's not getting home with 2 outs.
Santana, maybe.
Maybe. But, like, the I don't know.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either.
All right. Well, anyway.
I don't get it either.
Let's move on to a little bit of Cavalier talk. Lonzo Ball and Larry Nance Jr. had their introductory press conferences. Larry kind of really saying all the things that make the Cleveland fans, quote, gets us meter off the charts.
His gets us meter has always been off the charts. He cried when he was traded here in 2018.
Yeah. And, he said he knew he'd always come back here.
I believe that.
I good for him. I'm glad he's back. I think we talked about it last week. He could actually be a helpful piece on this basketball team, and so can Lonzo. Lonzo said he didn't grow up a Cavs fan, but he grew up a LeBron fan. He's younger than us. That makes sense in that era.
He said so by transit of property, he ended up being
he ended up being a Cavs fan. So good for those guys. You have anything to say about their intro? I mean, there's not much more.
No, I really liked to hear. I was a huge fan of Lonzo Ball's introductory press conference too, because he basically came in and said, this is a guy who, obviously coming into the league, was a little bit more on the arrogant side. It reminds me a lot of, honestly, how Shedeur Sanders came in. Dad was very involved, kind of on the arrogant side.
Yeah, but I don't think a lot with
projected top 3 pick in the draft.
With Lonzo, though, I think a lot of it. LeVar was far more outspoken than Lonzo ever was.
Sure.
So I think a lot of it was LeVar issued
sure.
or whatever.
Anyways, yeah. So we're talking, I want to say 7 years. I forget what draft he was in. I want to say this is 7, maybe 8 years later. He's coming to this Cavs team, accepted. He said, yeah, I know. I feel like this team absolutely fits my needs or fits how I play the style of basketball. Obviously he mentioned Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell running the first unit, openly accepted that role on the bench. I mean, I think he's going to basically take over that 6th man role. Obviously depends on what is going to happen with DeAndre Hunter, whether he's going to come off the bench or start. But I was a huge fan. It seems like Lonzo's become a lot more humble throughout his career. Not that he was, I did call him arrogant a little bit earlier, but I think he's just a humble guy right now in his career. He's accepted who he is as a player. I think those 2 years that he had off due to injury has really humbled him, and just basically accepted that playing professional sports a privilege in this. And now 2 years off, he's coming back, and obviously had that okay year with the Bulls last year, and now he's a Cavs. So I was excited by that press conference, and I'm actually more excited the more I look into him. I'm more excited about his fit for this team.
My biggest thing is, can he stay healthy? And
right.
That's
the big question. Yeah,
it actually goes for both those guys who were acquired here.
Former teammates.
Right. They were on the Lake Show together. And
right.
Boy, Lonzo threw Larry a lot of lobs back in the day.
Yeah.
And I did see a video of that on X the other day, as they call it nowadays. And it was pretty cool. Obviously they're both a lot older. Neither of them have that kind of athleticism. But if these guys could stay healthy, they both could be contributing key pieces to a rotation. So good for the Cavs, obviously being in the second apron, which we finally now do know what it is. They couldn't do much, but they did what they could.
Right.
All right. We've pushed this off long enough. I think, we don't want to go crazy on it. We've pushed
but
it off.
We have to discuss it.
We do have to just at least mention it. It is the middle of summer. We've beat the Guardians horse for quite a while.
Last few weeks.
And we still will, because they're the main team. They're the only team actively playing games right now. But it's time, folks, for us to do our first talk about this on the CSR. is LeBron James have any realistic shot of being a Cleveland Cavalier again? Now, let's give the parameters here, all right?
Yeah.
LeBron and Rob Pelinka, they're not going out to steakhouses and hanging out right now. They are at odds with each other, according to everybody in LeBron's camp. And
Sam Amico's been on that too, I want to say.
Yes, and everybody in the Lakers camp, okay? Now, do we know he's a giant pain in the ass? Absolutely. Is he make everything about him? Absolutely. But is he still a damn good basketball player and probably a top 10 player in the league?
Absolutely.
So I don't see it actually happening. I don't. I'm going to put that out there first.
Okay.
I really don't see it actually happening. But if he's not going to retire a Laker and finish there, it probably does make the most sense from his point of view. Now, do the Cavs want to go through all that? Because here's the deal. It's not like acquiring anybody else in the NBA, and it's a real pain in the ass, and it's a real chore to deal with him. It is an absolute circus. But is the circus worth it for the Cavaliers at this point, or do they have a good enough team outside of him to come outside the East next year? We just talked about it last week. Besides New York, what's there? Yeah, we talked about Orlando and Detroit, but they're not bona fide contenders yet. So does he push you over the top? Probably, but you got to be ready to deal with it for round 3, and it's a whole lot of crap coming at you.
So I think there is a certain circumstance in which it is worth it. I don't think us giving up Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and somebody else is worth acquiring LeBron. I don't. I think you lose too much size. I think you lose too much ball handling. I think the only way that I would be open to it, and I think the only way that it's genuinely realistic for the Cavs, is if the Lakers buy him out, and I don't see the Lakers buying him out.
It's too much money.
Too much money to pay for nothing. Like, that's the only way that I see this happening, is them coming to terms on a buyout. They owe him, what is it, like $51 million or something like that.
We just
and then
picked up the option for what, $52 million, I think?
Something like that. And then he signs for, I think there are rules against how much you can make after you're bought out by a team. I'm almost certain about that. So then he signs at like a vet minimum. Like, that's the only way that I see this happening. I think that's the only way the Cavs can afford it. I think that's the only realistic. Because like I said, you're not giving up a 24-year-old all-star point guard and a 26, 27-year-old former all-star center for 1 year of LeBron James, because that's what it. I think this is his last year in the league coming up.
I don't know. I think it depends on how well he plays, how well he stays healthy, all that kind of thing. Now, to me, it depends. Like, the Cavs bought their 2016 title. We've talked about that pretty extensively. But to me, making this move would be buying another title. So if you do trade Garland, because I think the other thing with LeBron, though, is LeBron ever been on a team where it's not his? Like, never.
No. And that's what the Lakers are trying to do right now. They're trying to make it Luka's team and not LeBron's.
And he hates it.
Hates it. Wants out because of it.
Would Donovan Mitchell be willing to play with LeBron?
I think so.
I mean, that's the thing. Like,
Donovan doesn't seem like a guy that would be too... Like, he seems like he's Kyrie Irving, but without the "I'm Superman" mantra.
So there's
like, I think Donovan would accept the back.
There's so many different angles to it. Like, I mean, I know Twitter's going nuts with it right now, but like, look, if LeBron could humble himself enough to play on a vet minimum salary and play here, sure. I just don't see that happening. But also, like, from his point of view, how much more money does he really need? I mean,
he doesn't need any more.
His NBA salary is probably only 30% of his yearly income.
No, exactly.
I mean, LeBron, I'll give him credit. Well, actually, the people around him, too. He's been a hell of an entrepreneur. He's gotten to restaurants. He's gotten to movies. I mean, he's gotten into every different industry
his own brand,
and business
obviously. Yeah.
that you could have. So, like, his NBA salary is nothing to him. So, like, does he need to play for $50 million? No, but is his ego and his agent going to tell him he does? Yes.
Right.
So I don't see the buyout thing happening. I think the only way it would happen is if they did come together on some sort of trade.
I just don't see the Cavs, like, from all the things that I've seen, the Cavs have no interest in, like, giving up legitimate assets for him because they know that it's 1 to 2 years at maximum of LeBron. And if you don't capitalize on that window, Darius Garland goes, let's say it is to the Lakers, and they've got Darius Garland, Luka, and Jared Allen there, and Darius Garland's a 26-year-old in the middle of his prime point guard. Maybe he's a top 5 point guard at that point. And you're looking at, oh, my God, we gave that up for 2 years of LeBron, and we were out in the Eastern Conference Finals.
The lack of championships in this town in the last, 60 years, to me, I could give a crap less if Darius Garland goes on to have a great career. If LeBron and Donovan come here and win a championship,
okay.
God bless, the Cavs could be terrible again.
But it's not even close to being a guarantee that if LeBron gets here, we're winning a championship. We're bringing him.
I agree.
We're bringing him in here, and this entire fan base wants to run the entire offense around Evan Mobley, and you're going to have LeBron James, Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley's going to have to be the third wheel at that point.
Yeah.
So and we're looking at this previous Lakers team that had LeBron and Luka Doncic, and they didn't make it out of the first round, and they had 2 top 10 players in the NBA.
Right.
Acquiring LeBron James and giving up 2 to 3 big assets does not make sense to me if I'm the Cleveland Cavaliers. The only way I'm doing it from Kobe Altman's standpoint is if you literally get him for nothing. That's the only thing. I'm not giving up the assets it takes to get
Which
1 to 2 years of LeBron.
Possible.
Exactly. Okay.
So,
well, then it's yeah.
So from your point of view, the LeBron, we just should move on to the next topic.
Yeah, unless he's bought out. Yeah. I mean, I'm not trading for LeBron James.
I'm not sure. I'm not ruling out trading for LeBron James. I would consider it. I would at least pick up the phone if I'm Kobe, call Rob Pelinka, call the Lakers. Just get a gauge. See what's going on. Is the media overblowing how much Rob Pelinka and LeBron hate each other right now? Probably.
Yeah, but do you think Rob Pelinka would say, yeah, we're just on horrible terms? I don't think he would just come out and say that to other general managers. I mean, all that does is drive that stock all the way down if you're Rob Pelinka. I mean, you're talking, no, we're doing good.
But how much do they really want to get rid of LeBron? If they want to get rid of LeBron, then is it one of those scenarios?
We're doing good, but we're open to hearing what you have to offer us.
Is it one of those scenarios where Kobe calls up and Rob Pelinka says, yeah, we've had enough of the circus. You guys want the circus back for round 3? It's all yours. Take it. Please. Go. I just need a couple assets for it. I don't know where it's at. I don't know where it's at. But every executive claims it's not good right now.
Yeah.
But let's pump the brakes on it. It's going to happen for sure just because he played in a golf outing that he plays in every single summer. Okay?
Yeah. Well, he was also wearing a welcome home hat.
Yeah, which he did that.
He also commented on, I don't know why I'm blanking on her name, former Cavs sideline reporter, Allie Clifton. Commented on her thing, yeah, you guys are wearing the right jerseys. 2 Cavs jerseys that are LeBron James jerseys.
So you're buying into everything LeBron wants you to buy into.
No, I'm just saying that I see why people are saying this stuff. There's only so many things that can become a coincidence. There's only so many okay, a welcome home hat. He's practicing at the Cavs facility, which I've heard he does a lot, which if you're the Cavs, why are you allowing him to do that? It's not like we're just letting random players
Yeah, but LeBron's a different case scenario.
But he plays for the Lakers.
He does and goes where he wants.
We're going to let Lonzo Ball and Larry Nance go practice at the Lakers facility?
Nobody's ever told LeBron no his whole life, so the Cavs aren't going to tell him no now.
I disagree with that. I think if you're not a member of the team, you shouldn't be at that facility practicing.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Go to the gym in Akron that you're so obsessed with.
But if LeBron says I'm going to practice here, the Cavs aren't going to tell him no. Nobody. I'm not saying your point's invalid. I'm just saying nobody tells LeBron no.
Which I think is absurd, though.
I mean, it's when you have that certain status. Nobody probably told Jordan no. LeBron's right there. Nobody tells LeBron no. Let's go way back when they were wearing shorts up to here.
Yeah.
You think anybody was telling Kareem no? No, you don't. You achieve that certain Nobody tells you no in your life.
I agree, but I disagree.
Okay. No, I'll keep going. Nobody tells Pat Mahomes no. Nobody tells Josh Allen no. When you have that,
Jalen Hurts had something to say to Pat Mahomes.
Yeah, that's true. But
but I understand your point. I just think from the Cavs' perspective, this is a guy who's used you for the last 20 years, 20 plus years. He's used this organization and he continues to do so.
Wow.
And I disagree with it.
So I'm going to say, to put a bow on the conversation, I'm going to say I'll give it like a 5% chance.
That's actually the number I was thinking, because I think 1's too low, but I think like 50-50 I think is way too high. I think 25% is too high.
Yeah.
I would 5 to 10 is probably where I'm hovering around, and 10 might be on the higher side there.
It's impossible to happen, but I think
it's not impossible. There's a 5% chance we're saying.
I'm saying this.
Okay.
I'm going to get onto a different point here.
Okay.
It's impossible for this to happen. He's still a top 8 to 10 player in the league, in my opinion.
Yep.
It'd be really cool if we get a top 8 to 10 player in the league, but there's just a giant storm of shit following him with the circus. I mean, that's just what he brings, and everybody knows it. And
I mean, he brings the attention. He brings the cryptic posts. Like, he's been known to do that. Yeah. No, I get that.
You get all the Clutch Sports folks involved with Rich Paul and all his thousands of his empire he's built. They're involved now. If he doesn't like Kenny Atkinson, he'll be gone. I mean, it's all that. Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
You have to remember, there's never been a coach that LeBron hasn't picked his entire career. Maybe the only one I could think of is like his rookie year when it was like Paul Silas or whatever. Like, yeah.
You're not letting a rookie dictate.
Right.
But
shortly thereafter, he fired Mike Brown, and then the beat goes on from there for the last 15 years.
Yep.
Like, nobody's going to tell me that he didn't pick J.J. Redick. He picked J.J. Redick. That was his boy from his podcast. He picked J.J. Redick. 100%.
All right.
You don't think so?
No, I agree with you, but I don't want to go through all the coaches that LeBron handpicked.
No,
I mean, you think he handpicked Frank Vogel?
Yeah, he liked Frank Vogel at the time, and then he quickly dismissed him.
Yeah, he did quickly.
Yeah.
He Frank Vogel won a championship and dismissed him like a year after.
Yeah. He liked Luke Walton for a hot second, and then it was like, nah, this ain't my vibe.
Yeah, LeBron is very like flavor of the week with stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's always been. Same with Roger.
Hated Kevin Love, then loved him, and then wanted to trade him for Paul George, and then was like, and then we couldn't get Paul George. And he's,
Yeah, we'll take him for now.
Yeah, we'll take him for now.
One of my favorite things that he ever did as a general manager of the Cavs, and I mean that with all sincerity.
I know exactly what you're about to say, I think.
When he decided in 2018 he was not going to get to the finals, and he'd flip that entire roster in a matter of like
it was
3 hours.
Dude, I even think it might have been like a half hour. For some reason, I remember, because you and I were roommates at the time at Baldwin Wallace, and I remember I had woken up from an afternoon nap, and it was right after the trade deadline, and I had seen the Cavs had made like 3 trades in a matter of like 25 minutes. And one of them I saw was bringing Jordan Clarkson, who, if you're a loyal listener, you know this. If you're not, you might not. But Jerome was like, he's got a Jordan Clarkson Cavs jersey, believe it or not, number 8 Jordan Clarkson Cavs jersey, and loved him when he was with the Lakers. And I saw that Jordan Clarkson was coming to Cleveland. I saw the trade, and I immediately just like, it was one of those, I dropped my head, and I was like, of course we got this guy. I texted Jerome immediately, and I think you had a jersey order within probably an hour or two.
No,
Jordan Clarkson's debut was in TD Garden when they spoiled Paul Pierce's
and then
retirement ceremony.
That was Sunday. They came home to play the Nets that Tuesday. We went to the game together. I was in the team shop.
That's what it was.
Put down my $110, and I had my Clarkson.
Yeah, his second game.
And LeBron, he wanted Larry Nance. He wanted to get younger at that deadline, and that's what he did. He thought bringing his buddy Dwayne Wade and Derrick Rose and all that, and then he quickly dismissed those guys.
Which, friend of the show, Phil Sprance, has brought this up to us off the air. But if you remember in those deals, we had to give the Lakers a first-round pick to take on Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, he cleared room for himself.
He cleared room for himself and gave his future team a first-round pick for a potential asset.
Yeah.
If you're LeBron, just genius general management. And once again, to my point from 5 minutes ago, taking advantage of the Cavs whenever he wants. And we just, come back. Come back and use our facilities, even though we're not paying you.
Yeah. Well, Hey, as a GM, LeBron's got a 50-50 record. Over the last 20 years, he's made some really good moves. He's made some really questionable ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. The one that I don't think I truly don't believe he had any involvement in, I think he was just as shocked as anybody, was the Luka one.
Yeah, he came out and said that.
That was more just Nico Harrison being an idiot.
Well, I think also that might have been Rob Pelinka saying, I've got the power. I'm not coming to you anymore.
Yeah. I mean, because maybe Rob Pelinka doesn't like the last coach LeBron hired. Maybe they don't like Redick. I don't know.
I kind of like Redick, though.
Redick's fine.
Yeah.
He's fine.
Yeah.
I remember LeBron's best coaching decision, and I know we didn't want to keep going down this rabbit hole.
I said it, and now I'm actually kind of having fun with it now.
When LeBron fired David Blatt for Tyronn Lue, that was genius. I
know a couple people who would disagree with you.
Yeah, I do too, and they both share the same name, and we're not going to say it. They know who they are when they listen.
We've mentioned both of them on this episode.
Yeah. When he brought in Ty Lue, I still don't think if LeBron doesn't fire David Blatt when we were 40-11, I think if we have David Blatt the whole way through, I really don't believe we win a championship.
Well, I remember when we fired him, the Cavs went on a little bit of a winning streak there. Like, they were playing more up-tempo offense. And then, of course, just over time, you have LeBron and Kyrie, and they eventually get back to the ISO offense that they were running. And that's honestly what frustrated me about kind of bringing this full circle to this current Cavs team. Was it frustrating me in the playoffs is they got so away from the ball movement stuff. They were just putting it in Garland and Mitchell's hands and letting them go ISO ball all the time, it felt like. And it's like, this is not how we played basketball the entire year.
No, not at all. But yeah.
From one former 2016 champ to another, I thought it was actually pretty cool that, I shouldn't say cool, but Kevin Love was involved in that one trade that got sent to Utah within the last week, and there's rumors about him being potentially bought out. And that's a guy that I think is a realistic, way more of a realistic shot, and I think there's actually probably a 40-60 shot of him actually being a Cav again. Because, if you look at these past teams, that spark he had on that 2022 Cavs team and how he played off the bench before we just decided that we weren't going to play him anymore.
I don't know how much Kevin Love has left in the tank.
Well, neither do I, but I think that's what's so great about re-signing him is that you don't have, or signing him back if he eventually gets bought out, is you don't have to give him a big-time role. If there's injuries to Larry Nance, even Dean Wade, let's say, because Dean Wade's come into his own role. He wasn't great in the playoffs, but he came into his own role last year. Like, if there are injuries to them, you have a veteran, former champion that's played for the city and played with a lot of these same people before that probably just fills in like a glove.
Well, the nice thing is he's not going to come in here and pick the coach, pick the general manager, all that.
Well, and let's not. LeBron's a significantly better basketball player than Kevin Love, so I don't want to compare that exact situation. But I would love that signing, and I don't want to give him. He would almost be a DMP coach's decision every night for me. It would just be his presence in the locker room and what he can bring to the organization. And if he needs to play due to injuries, then he can play 15 minutes a night. I think it makes too much sense.
I don't know. I'm not as sold on it as you, but
we don't have a lot of bigs to begin with, to be honest.
No,
we got Allen
true.
and Mobley, and then we're relying on Wade, who's 6'9", 230, and has never been really a post threat. And then we've got Larry Nance, who is an undersized big as well.
Right. That's true. That's very true. All right. Well, it's that time. We got to move on here to wrap this thing up. Odds and ends. The Yankees DFA DJ LeMahieu, who won a batting title there, but boy, is he fallen off a cliff. But he still can hit, and right now would bat second in this lineup. Why not bring him in? Oh, because he costs money. Won't happen.
I think he's $26 million, isn't he?
Yeah, I wouldn't claim him on waiver. Like, they DFA'd him. I would wait until he eventually gets released, I would assume. And then what I would do from there is you bring him in on like a minor league deal, because obviously we know the $26 million totally out of the option.
Right.
But I think he's your two-hitter, and he fills your hole at second base. But how much are they trying to win? We talked about that a lot earlier tonight. We don't know. But if they actually do give any single, this would be a move to make. Yeah,
and I agree with you. I wouldn't, and honestly, I wouldn't even pay the $26 million for him. I don't think he's worth the 26. But to your point, if he clears waivers and they end up outright releasing him and we can get him for $1 million or $2 million, all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. The KD trade is officially in. It was a 7-team deal. First in NBA history. Boy, the NBA, They made like 4-team deals a regular thing. Now they're doing 7.
Yeah, this is the first time in NBA history, and I don't even know the ins and outs. I mean, I saw it, but there's so many moving pieces. I want to say there's like 30 moving pieces
Unbelievable.
in this 7-team deal with obviously 7 teams involved. Very interesting. I think it is cool. You know, I feel like this is one of those things you see in like fantasy football or fantasy basketball where you just get a bunch of teams that want different pieces or whatever. And I think this was just something that didn't need to be made a 7-team deal, but it just was because of how salaries lined up and things like that.
And probably a lot of the teams are in that second apron. That famous second apron.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that'll do it for us this week. Derek, thanks, buddy. Good job. Kevin,
thanks for the oil change too, man.
Yeah, he's like take 5, but better. Kevin,
way better.
Tell the people how to follow us on the socials, please.
Yeah, TikTok, X, Instagram at CLE Sports Realm. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, Cleveland Sports Realm there. Don't believe I missed an at. Did I?
No, you didn't. But how about
Spotify, Apple Music,
Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts, excuse me, and then I just mentioned YouTube as well. Please follow your boys, interact with us. We're more than happy to interact back. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure doing this. We've had a lot of fun and continue to have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And we're going to continue, not every episode, but once in a while here and there, we are going to keep doing the guest thing. We enjoy having a third person here.
Yeah.
More work for Derek. He doesn't like it. No, I'm just kidding. He's okay. He likes to see these people too.
Yeah.
But anyhow, give us a thumbs up for your boys. We appreciate it. For Kevin and myself on the 1s and 2s, we'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.
And because we didn't talk about them too much, go Browns.